the next page in 2031, anyone making less than 15,000 sees that. Check this out. I thought this was a mistake. I thought I was not reading this correctly. An increase in their taxes of 74.3%. And from 15,000 to 30,000 of 20.6%. Is that correct? Or is that, did you guys make a mistake, or is that like?
No mistake in the numbers.
Would you support a millionaire tax?
I think it would be very disruptive, because a lot of the millionaires would leave the country. You know, in the old days, they left states. They'd go from one state to the other. Now with transportation so quick and so easy, they leave countries. You'll lose a lot of money if you do that. That would, and other countries that have done it have lost a lot of people. They lose their wealthy people. That would be bad, because the wealthy people pay the tax. Okay?
I'm using your numbers, and it looks to me like we are providing, under the Republican bill, the average tax cut for a taxpayer who's making more than $1 million a year. Somebody who's pretty comfortable in our society, more than $1 million in a single year. They get 310 times the average tax cut for taxpayers making less than $50,000 a year. I don't call that prioritizing the working class, wherever you came from, prioritizing the people that are out there providing the services that make America go. I call it more trickle-down economics, that a little will come dribbling down to those who are working hard out there, from Elon Musk and all the people that were on the front row behind the president in his inauguration. It's pretty clear where the focus is, where the whole purpose of this tax proposal is. It's not to help working America. It's to take from those who are working their health care, their future, and use those proceeds and $1 trillion and trillions of dollars of debt to provide more benefits to the billionaire class.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning, and you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
So if you work for a living, you pay taxes on every dollar you earn. But if you're ultra wealthy, you can make millions, live like a king, and pay almost nothing. Not because you're cheating, because the rules are built for you. These aren't glitches, they're loopholes. Perfectly legal, written into the tax code, by the rich, for the rich. Let's start with inheritance. Say your parents buy a house for $200,000, and it's worth $2 million when they pass. You sell it, you pay zero tax on the $1.8 million in profit. It's called the step up in basis. Now imagine that, but with stocks, and instead of $2 million, it's $200 million. That's how wealth skips the IRS and builds dynasties. But here's the wild one. Rich people don't even sell their assets. They just borrow against them. You heard that. They go to their bank, use their stocks or property as a collateral, and take out a loan, tax-free, because loans aren't income. Then they deduct the interest. And when they die, their heirs inherit the assets with all taxes wiped clean. It's called buy, borrow, die, and it's the ultimate cheat code. You want another? Well, if you manage a hedge fund, there's a loophole that lets you call your paycheck an investment and pay half the tax your assistant does. It's called carried interest, and it's been protected by both parties for years. And then there are the dynasty trusts, legal shelters to hide family wealth for generations. No estate taxes, no accountability. It's just wealth compounding forever. Together, these tricks cost us over $100 billion a year in lost tax revenue, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Meanwhile, your rent's up, your groceries are up, your tax bill's due, and the richest people in America, they're funding luxury lifestyles with debt, while you pay full freight on every dollar you earn. Now here's the kicker. Today, Trump released the plan for his new big, beautiful tax bill. And after everything I just told you, it doesn't close a single one of those loopholes, not one. Instead, it adds $3.8 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years, while the wealthiest Americans keep getting a free pass. Look, this isn't about punishing success. It is about ending a system where working people pay full freight while the ultra-wealthy live in a parallel economy of loopholes and exceptions. Even if we changed nothing else in the tax code, just closing these loopholes would bring back $100 billion a year. That's $1 trillion of the $3.8 trillion that was projected to be lost over the next 10 years. And that's money we can use for schools, roads, healthcare, whatever we decide together. Most people have no idea this is how the system works.
I voted to close I think one of the loopholes he took advantage of when he claimed $1 billion loss that enabled him to avoid paying taxes.
Did you use that $916 million loss to avoid paying personal federal income taxes?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And so do all of her donors, or most of her donors. I know many of her donors. I absolutely used it, and so did Warren Buffett, and so did George Soros, and so did many of the other people that Hillary is getting money from. Now, she complains that Donald Trump took advantage of the tax code. Well, why didn't she change it? Why didn't you change it when you were a senator? The reason you didn't is that all your friends take the same advantage that I do. And I do. You have provisions in the tax code that, frankly, we could change. But you wouldn't change it because all of these people...
Hi, everyone. I thought I'd do a quick post about how regressive tariffs are as a tax strategy. The Yale Budget Lab estimated that the cost to American consumers was going to be about $4,700 a year at the higher China tariff rate of 145%. And that was at an effective tariff rate of 28% overall. So adjusting this down to the new effective tax rate of 17.8% that the Yale Budget Lab has estimated, the cost to American households will be around $3,000. So $3,000 to a family making $50,000 a year, it's a 6% tax hit. If you're a family making $100,000 a year, that's only 3% tax hit. And if you're making $500,000 a year, it's almost 0.5%, 0.6% of a tax hit. So tariffs are absolutely a regressive tax that will be also coming at a time when it seems many Americans are going to be losing some of their health care coverage. So for this reason, among many, I am not a fan of tariffs. Let me know what you think.
It really is a tax on being poor, and I apologize for the brightness. I got another example, and again, this one relates to me. There are a million others that a million other people have experienced, right? Going to a laundromat. When I was broke, I had to spend $20 a week going to a laundromat. And I remember telling my boss at the time how hard it was. It was like, man, I wish I could afford a washing machine. I wish I could afford a washing machine. He's like, well, why don't you just save up for one? I literally did not have the money to save up for a washing machine. I had to spend basically $80 a month to do my laundry. The thing is, a used washer and dryer at the time, $150. If I had $150, I could have done my laundry for pennies per load if I had the $150 to just go buy a washer and dryer. But I did not. I had to go spend $20 a week to do it because I did not have the upfront cost to save the after effect money. Almost everything about being poor works in this way. You are literally, why don't you buy this in bulk? Why don't you buy that in bulk? Why don't you buy a nicer car that you don't have to spend so much money? Everything about being poor applies like this. The second that I was able to have an extra $150, I got a promotion. That promotion came with about, I think, $800, $1,000 extra a month. The first thing I did, like literally the first thing I did with that new money was buy a washer and dryer. It paid for itself in 2 months. Being poor is expensive. And if you've never been this kind of poor, that 40% of the country lives this way, then you do not understand how difficult it is.
So people always talk about how the rich never pay their fair share, but how exactly do they get away with it? Well, the most common trick is called buy, borrow, die. Step 1 is straightforward. They buy assets like stocks that go up in value over time. So let's say Jeff Bezos buys $1 billion of stocks and his stocks are going up each year. Now this part is critical to understand. He will never have to pay taxes on the money he made from his stocks going up as long as he never sells his stocks. The idea is that stocks are just pieces of paper that he can't actually use to buy anything in real life, so the government only taxes him once he sells these pieces of paper to pocket the cash he made. But what's the point of putting $1 billion into stocks if you never actually sell it and use the money you made? Well, that's where step 2, borrowing, comes into play. Let's say Jeff Bezos wants to spend $100 million on fixing up his poor rusty yacht collection. Well, if he sells $100 million of his stocks, he'd have to pay 20% capital gains tax or $20 million. So to avoid this, he just takes out a $100 million loan and spends that instead. It sounds so counterintuitive to borrow this money when you're already so rich and you could have this cash on hand, but with the special type of loans that Jeff can get, it actually makes total sense, and here's why. Jeff goes to the the bank and says, hey, I want you to give me a $100 million loan with really great terms, but by the way, I have $1 billion stock portfolio, so if you ever don't think I'll pay you back, then you can just take from that. To the bank, this is actually a really great deal because the $1 billion stock portfolio that Jeff Bezos is offering as collateral is worth way more than the $100 million loan. So the bank can sleep easy at night knowing that Jeff will be able to pay them back. And the bank rolls out the red carpet for Bezos with special privileges to keep him as a client. To start, Jeff has no deadline to ever pay off the principal on the $100 million loan. He does have to pay interest on it, but as long as he keeps paying interest, he's never required to pay back the $100 million itself by any certain time. It sounds crazy, but because the bank knows that they can get the money back from Jeff, they don't have to get it back anytime soon, and they'd rather just keep charging him interest. But that's the other thing. The interest rate that Jeff gets is way lower than what we would get. If we'd have to pay 10% interest on a loan, he might only have to pay 5% interest on it, because the bank has to compete with all the other banks for the privilege of getting to keep Jeff Bezos as their client, so they have to offer the lowest interest rate they can. Alright, so Jeff Bezos now has $100 million to spend however he wants with no deadline to pay it back as long as he keeps paying 5% interest. Now you might be thinking, well, I'd rather just sell my stocks and pay $20 million of capital gains tax one time rather than keep my stocks and take out this loan and have to pay $5 million of interest every single year. But you have to consider this. If you keep your stocks, it can keep growing in the market and it will likely grow by more than $5 million a year. The US stock market has historically gone up by 11% every year on average over the last 100 years, so if your stocks go up by $11 million, then that more than offsets the $5 million that you have to pay in interest. In fact, you're actually netting an extra $6 million practically out of thin air for doing nothing other than just being super rich Jeff Bezos who gets super great deals on loans. But that's not all. The $5 million a year that Jeff Bezos spends on those interest payments are also typically tax deductible, so he pays even less taxes. So to sum this up, by taking this loan, Jeff got the $100 million to spend on his yachts, avoided having to pay $20 million of capital gains tax had he sold his stocks, is now netting an extra $6 million a year from not having to sell his stocks, and got a tax deduction of $5 million a year. But that's not all, because there's still step 3. Once Jeff Bezos passes away, let's say his son Preston inherits his stock portfolio. Well, the government acts as if his son got the stock portfolio brand new with no capital gains. If the original $1 billion stock portfolio grows to $5 billion by the time Jeff Bezos passes away, then he would have $4 billion worth of capital gains that he would have to pay tax on. But when he passes this portfolio onto his son gets it on a stepped up basis where it's basically like a brand new $5 billion portfolio with $0 of capital gains, so his son doesn't owe any tax. So throughout the entire process, Jeff and his family avoided paying a single dime of capital gains tax.
I know you told me you voted for President Trump. What were you hoping that he would do?
I was hoping he would did something that made sense regarding the economy, made some kind of progress in bettering, the benefits of being a veteran. But I mean, it just seemed like he actually cared about doing what was best for the country, but now it just feels like all about me, Donald Trump, not, the guy out there working in the trenches trying to make ends meet, trying to pay a mortgage, trying to pay the bills. It goes against everything I expected when, I voted for him.
So you're not satisfied with what you see?
No. And it doesn't even have to do with anything about me getting fired. I mean, if I had gotten fired as part of the, government, cutting government spending, I would have been fine with that. I can accept that. But he's not delivering on anything he said he was going to do. So what's your real game plan? It doesn't make sense to me.
There are some things that he promised to do that he has put in place. I mean, there are executive orders that he's done, that he said that he was going to do. You don't feel like he's lived up to those promises?
I mean, where are the results? I mean, seriously, prices are still going up. We're now in the middle of a tariff war with a bunch of countries that used to be our steadfast allies. I mean, how do you make an enemy of Canada? They're right next to us, and they've been one of our premier allies and commerce partners for, I mean, seriously, like what, centuries now?
And he did say that he was going to put tariffs in place. Did you just not think that they would be implemented in this particular way?
I didn't think they were going to be put in play in a juvenile way. I mean, where was the attempt to actually talk to the heads of these other countries like, hey, you know, I feel you have unfair tariffs against our products. I'd like to talk about it first. And if we can't work out some kind of resolution, then I feel to protect our people, we need to implement this kind of tariff. There was no attempt at even talking to the other countries.